Brandt Clarke conversation, and Kevin Weeks put it out there, but Drew Doughty came back from injury, and I think this is just a great way to start the show because it's a hot topic and a great up-and-coming young player in the National Hockey League, a right-shot young defenseman, and if those guys are available, which they aren't very often, I think we need to talk about it. So whether the trade rumors are valid or not, I think Kevin Weeks is a pretty legit source, and he's got legit sources behind the scenes, so there's something to it, even if head coach Jim Hiller is going to try to put some water on the fire here. I think there's still some smoke. So let's look at the trade destinations here on the board. So starting with the Buffalo Sabres, I think the Sabres have obviously had a really disappointing year again, and I think when you look at that right side, they've been really trying to find a great pair with Owen Power, a great partner, and that could be Brandt Clarke. So you could look at a scenario where it's Bowen Byram to LA or Bowen Byram in a different trade to Vancouver. Obviously, there's been the Elias Pettersson trade rumors, but I think Brandt Clarke would be a perfect scenario for Owen Power long term. Owen Power, steady guy and already showing good defensive instincts. I think he's just going to grow on that and really build as an overall two-way defenseman. And frankly, I think one day he'll be one of the best two-way defensemen in the league, if not in the next couple of years. So he's already showing great signs. And I think with an offensive powerhouse like Brandt Clarke, obviously they have Rasmus Dahlin, but I think Rasmus Dahlin with his leadership, with his overall capabilities and maturing as a defenseman, I think overall he's going to keep improving his game. So Brandt Clarke could get an opportunity to be on a top power play, even joined by Rasmus Dahlin. So you see that the Buffalo Sabres, and then number two, the Dallas Stars. I think when you look at the Stars, it's another scenario like the Sabres where they're a little bit weaker on that right side. I think Miro Heiskanen being out also might open Dallas's eyes to go, okay, we need another offensive threat back there, because right now it's Esa Lindell, it's Thomas Harley who could provide some offense, but you've been relying on Miro Heiskanen. So if Dallas could get aggressive and maybe offer something really nice to the LA Kings, maybe there's a deal here to be had. And obviously Dallas has got a lot of young forwards, intriguing offensive forwards like a Logan Stankoven and a Maverick Bourque. I'm sure LA would look at those guys and see fit for a deal like this. So while it's in the same conference, and maybe LA, if they were going to consider trading Brandt Clarke, which I'll make my opinion known, I don't think they should. But if they do, they probably want to avoid the same conference, so go to the Eastern Conference so they don't have to play them and have that, I would say, reminder if he does pan out to be a great offensive defenseman, and frankly, he already is. He's shown great signs this year. But I think if the Dallas Stars got aggressive with an offer, and similar to the Vancouver Canucks at number 3 and Utah HC at number 4, the Utah Hockey Club is interesting. You go back to last year, Nick Kyprios from Sportsnet brought up that he thought there was a deal to be had with Brandt Clarke going to, at the time, before Utah, Arizona, and then maybe Utah bringing him in. Of course, Utah ended up going for different acquisitions on the defense group. They acquired Mikhail Sergachev from the Lightning. They acquired defenseman John Marino from the New Jersey Devils. So they did go in different directions, but there were rumors that that franchise was going aggressive to acquire Brandt Clarke. If that conversation was real, maybe they revisit it. I mean, I go back to number 3. I think the Canucks are more realistic right now than Utah, just because the Canucks have two big names floating, and JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, two names that I think the LA Kings would big time benefit from, because if you haven't been following the LA Kings this year, they have been struggling to score, which was so ironic on why they pulled Brandt Clarke out of the lineup for Drew Doughty when Drew Doughty's been injured. And of course, Drew Doughty's resume has been amazing. You look at the LA Kings Stanley Cups, Team Canada in the Olympics, all this great stuff, right? And Drew Doughty might be the replacement for Pietrangelo in the Four Nations coming up. Still, with all that in mind, you don't pull Brandt Clarke out of the lineup because he's the guy that provides offense from your back end. You need any proof? Well, they pull Brandt Clarke out of the lineup and they get shut out by the Florida Panthers. 0 goals on the board over 60 minutes, and they lose 3-0. So you need a guy like Brandt Clarke in the lineup, and that's why if you're going to make a trade like this, you definitely need to be bringing in offensive power, and that would be potentially from the Canucks. Number 5, the Ottawa Senators. I do think, similar to what I've been having that conversation, is the right shot is a unicorn in the NHL, especially on that back end, especially in the defense group. Similar to Buffalo, like Owen Power, Ottawa's got this guy named Jake Sanderson who's just a stud on the back end, and I think when you look at his abilities, he would balance out a Brandt Clarke really well. So I'll throw the hot take out there. If there was ever a scenario where Ottawa would be willing to trade Thomas Chabot, I think LA would be all over that. But I do think that LA is looking for more maturity. They've really, I would say, fast-tracked their rebuild, which I don't really agree with, but they've done that, and they've been stopped by Edmonton now numerous times, specifically 3 times in that division in the playoffs. So I think LA should keep Brandt Clarke. I'm making that very clear. But if there are other teams involved, I mean, Nashville would be really interesting. I wonder, again, just saying Nashville, you look at the scenario where they haven't played well this season. I really think they could use a change of scenery with a couple of guys. If I'm LA, I look specifically at a couple of guys like whether it's Steven Stamkos or Jonathan Marchessault. Marchessault just came from Vegas. I'm sure he wouldn't mind going back in that western side of the U.S. And I mean, maybe it's to LA instead. But no, it's interesting. I think Nashville probably a little less likely. But Toronto is another interesting one. There's a lot of, and I'll talk about it in a bit, with Toronto's losing streak right now and the losses they've experienced in the month of January. But Morgan Riley's been in some trade rumors recently, which, again, I don't agree with. But if the Leafs were trying to get younger and try to get a right shot guy that brings some offense and could partner with Jake McCabe, it would be Brandt Clarke. And the Leafs have some prospects they could trade, whether it's an Easton Cowan. They have Topi Niemela, right shot young defenseman in the Toronto Marlies AHL system right now that's been tossing some rumors. And then similar to the Montreal Canadiens, they have some right shot young defensemen like a Logan Mailloux. Maybe Montreal could offer LA one of their forwards in exchange for getting Brandt Clarke. So I could see Toronto and Montreal in the mix. I do think that makes some sense. But again, this is very hypothetical. I do put some trust in Kevin Weekes in terms of the conversation, but I would say it's very premature and definitely, in my opinion, not smart for the LA Kings to trade Brandt Clarke. So I'll leave it at that.